The door of our apartment swung open with a gentle push, and I stepped inside quietly. The evening was unusually silent, almost too silent. I took a few steps and froze. On my couch sat a stranger, confident, relaxed, casually holding a glass of red wine. He looked completely at home. He glanced at me calmly. "Emma, you said he'd be back later." He called toward the next room. "What the hell?" My temples began to throb. I slowly turned toward the kitchen. Emma stood in the doorway wearing a thin silk robe, hair slightly disheveled, looking back at me without panic or shame. "Max," she said calmly, evenly. "We need to talk." "Talk?" I finally managed to breathe, forcing myself not to explode. "Who is this Emma?" She didn't even glance at him. "Max, I've opened up our marriage." I blinked. "You've what?" "I opened up our marriage," she repeated slowly, as if explaining something obvious. "I don't want monogamy anymore, Max. I don't want limits." "So you're cheating and calling it an open marriage?" "No," she said firmly. "I'm saying we're both free. You can do whatever you want." I rubbed my face, as if trying to wake myself from this stupid nightmare. "And you didn't think to ask me first?" Emma frowned slightly, as if I'd said something absurd. "Max, don't be so outdated." "Outdated?" I glanced back at the stranger. He finally met my gaze and smiled. "Dude, don't take it so personally," he said calmly. My jaw tightened. Anger boiled inside me. "So that's it?" I turned back to Emma. "You just decided our marriage isn't a marriage anymore, without even considering my feelings?" Emma rolled her eyes. "Max, please." Her voice remained steady, emotionless. Cold. At that moment, I understood clearly. The woman I'd spent 10 years with was no longer someone I knew. But if she thought I'd just quietly leave, she was sorely mistaken. I don't remember leaving the apartment. All I recall is closing the door behind me and standing in a dark hallway. My head spun, and the world around me blurred. I didn't even grab my jacket, just stood there in my t-shirt, feeling the evening chill seep beneath my skin. The phone in my pocket buzzed, but I didn't have the strength to reach for it. I sank onto a stair and stared at the wall ahead. One question churned endlessly in my mind. How could she? 10 years together. 10 damn years. We built this marriage, faced every problem together, supported each other through everything. And now, I've opened up our marriage. Those words replayed over and over in my mind. Her calm expression. Her indifference. Her slight irritation, as if I were not a husband she'd betrayed, but a child incapable of understanding adult life. Eventually, I pulled out my phone. 9:12 p.m. 5 missed calls, all from Trevor. I tapped. Call back. And he answered before the first ring finished. Max, where are you? I opened my mouth but didn't know what to say. Max? Dude, are you there? My voice was hoarse, as though I'd been smoking all day. She cheated on me, Trevor. What? He went silent for a moment. Then, where are you right now? In the stairwell. I can't go back inside. Stay there. I'm coming right now. For the first time that evening, I felt something akin to relief. 20 minutes later, I was sitting in a bar on the other side of town, staring blankly at a glass of whiskey. Trevor sat quietly beside me, not pressing, not asking stupid questions. I took my first sip. The burning liquid scalded my throat, but I didn't care. She said I don't own her. I muttered. Trevor frowned. She said we're in an open marriage now. I continued. But I never agreed to this, you know? She just decided for both of us. She cheated, Trevor said coldly. And now she wants you to accept it as normal. I stared into my glass. I loved her, Trevor. 10 years. Man. He rubbed his face. Hey, are you sure this started recently? A chill ran down my spine. What? You know women don't suddenly decide to have an open marriage. It's not spontaneous. Maybe she's been doing this for a while? I slowly set down the glass. That thought stuck in my mind like a thorn. When I returned to the apartment, I carefully opened the door. She was home. I heard noises coming from the bathroom. I stood in the darkened living room, the entire apartment feeling alien to me now. My gaze fell onto her purse. I swallowed the lump in my throat. And before I could change my mind, I reached inside and grabbed her phone. "Here's your text translated into American English." The sound of running water echoed from the bathroom. Emma was taking a shower. This was my chance. I typed in her usual passcode, 0307, her birthday. She never changed it. Unlocked. The screen lit up. My heart raced as I quickly checked her messages. "Owen, today, 8:23 p.m. You're sure he's stuck at work?" "Yeah, he said he'd be late." "Perfect. I'll bring wine. You wear something sexy." "Like always." My head started spinning. 8:23 p.m. That was 20 minutes before. I gripped her phone so tightly that the screen nearly cracked. I scrolled higher. "Owen, a week ago." "Are you sure he doesn't suspect anything?" "He's too wrapped up in his own stuff to notice." "Good." I felt sick. I typed "how long" into the chat search bar. Results appeared instantly. "Owen, 1 month ago." God, I can't believe we've hidden this for so long. We planned it well. 3 months. She'd been playing me for 3 months. I dropped onto the couch, numb. The screen's glow reflected off my face, but I'd barely noticed it. 3 months she pretended to be the perfect wife. The shower stopped. I quickly locked the phone and placed it back exactly where she'd left it. The bathroom door opened, and Emma stepped out, wrapped in a towel. She paused, noticing me. "You're still awake?" I forced myself to look calm. "Couldn't sleep." Emma approached carefully, reaching out for my hand. "We should talk about." I jerked away abruptly. She froze. "I'm just tired," I said coldly, standing up. "We'll talk tomorrow." I walked past her without another glance. 3 months. She'd thought I'd never find out. But now I knew everything. And that changed the game completely. I couldn't sleep. The words from her messages replayed endlessly in my head. "He's too busy to notice. He's comfortable living this way. We planned it well." Anger churned in me. Emma expected a fight. She wanted drama, shouting accusations. But I wouldn't give her the satisfaction. I had another plan. Quietly, I picked up her phone again. I already had Owen's number, but I needed more. Opening her gallery revealed photos I'd never seen, images clearly not meant for me. Then, social media. She'd erased almost everything incriminating, but missed one crucial detail: a hotel reservation confirmation. A different city. A weekend when I was working. She'd spend it with him. I copied everything, took screenshots, and sent them to myself. I could have deleted the message, but why bother? Returning her phone, I settled in, waiting for morning. This time, I'd play by my own rules. I lay there, thoughts swirling in my head as I stared at the ceiling. Beside me, Emma stretched slowly and opened her eyes. Seeing me, she softly smiled, as if nothing had happened. "You're awake," she said gently. I nodded silently. She propped herself up slightly, wrapping the blanket around herself. "I know it's hard for you to accept this, but it doesn't mean everything has to change," she continued. I felt my fingers curl into fists. "I don't see the point." She sighed and sat up, pulling the blanket around her shoulders. "Listen, I understand this is hard for you to accept, but it doesn't mean everything has to change." I felt my anger rising. "I don't see the point." She sighed and sat up, wrapping herself in the blanket. "Listen, I know it's difficult, but living a lie is worse. You know that." My fists tightened involuntarily. "Emma, you're not honest. You didn't tell me anything until it benefited you." She narrowed her eyes but didn't look away. "And you won't leave," she said quietly. I stared at her. "Why do you think that?" "Because you're comfortable," she replied calmly. I looked at her, incredulous. What? She tilted her head slightly. Because you're comfortable. You're used to it. You like things taken care of. I couldn't believe my ears. So now you're justifying it? I'm just saying you won't leave. I stared at her for several seconds before speaking. Fine. I stood and moved toward the door. Emma crossed her arms. This is ridiculous, Max. You'll be back. I paused at the door. We'll see. I walked out, slamming the door behind me. But even as I sat down in my car, her words lingered in my mind. You'll be back. I parked near Trevor's house and sat in the car, staring blankly at the windshield. My head was buzzing, thoughts tangled into chaos. I left. But why did I still feel trapped? I slammed my fist on the steering wheel. No. She wouldn't have that power over me. Getting out of the car, I climbed the stairs and knocked on the door. Trevor opened immediately. I stepped inside and dropped onto the sofa. I left. For good? I didn't answer. Trevor sighed, sitting across from me. Okay, so what's next? I rubbed my face with my palms. I don't know yet. Trevor leaned forward. Maybe it's time you played her game? I looked at him suspiciously. What do you mean? He smiled darkly. She's been doing what she wants for months. Why should you be morally pure? I clenched my jaw. You're saying I should. Dude, she started it. Why do you have to be the good guy? I remained silent. If she doesn't want a divorce, maybe she needs to face her greatest fear. Which is? He smiled slightly. Losing control. I hesitated. What are you saying? You don't need to argue or ask questions. Just make her lose control. I frowned. You want me to play by her rules? No. You play by your own rules, but you turn them against her. I leaned back. How? He shrugged. She made the first move. Now it's your turn. Don't confront her, just make things unbearable for her. I stared at him in silence. Make her regret it, he continued softly. I thought for a moment, then stood up. We'll see. For the first time, the thought of turning the tables felt real. Maybe you're right. As I walked away, I felt something change inside me. Emma had no idea what was coming. I returned home late the next evening. As soon as I walked in, the sun had already begun breaking through the curtains, casting faint patches of light onto the ceiling. I lay on my back, staring at them as thoughts raced through my mind. Beside me, Emma slowly stretched and opened her eyes. Seeing me, she smiled softly, as if nothing had happened. I thought you'd left for good, she said, closely watching me. I calmly took off my jacket. I don't see the point, I replied coldly. She sighed and sat up, wrapping herself in the blanket. Listen, I understand it's hard for you to accept, but that doesn't mean everything has to change. I quickly suppressed my anger. I don't see the point. She sighed again, pulling the blanket tighter around herself. Look, I understand it's difficult for you, but living a lie is worse. You know that. I felt my fingers clench into fists. Emma, you're not being honest. You didn't say anything until it suited you. She narrowed her eyes slightly. You won't leave, she said softly. I looked at her. Why do you think that? She tilted her head a bit. Because you're comfortable. I stared at her as if she were insane. What? You won't leave because you're comfortable, she repeated calmly. You're used to this. You like that everything's taken care of. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. So now you're justifying this? I'm just saying, you're not going anywhere. I stayed quiet for a few seconds before speaking. Fine. We'll see. I stood up, grabbing my jacket from the chair. You're not going anywhere, she said softly. I glanced at her. Why do you think that? She tilted her head slightly. Because it's convenient for you. I stared silently at her for several seconds before answering. Fine. We'll see. I turned and grabbed my keys, slamming the door behind me. But even as I got into my car, her words echoed in my mind. You'll be back. I woke up early. Emma was still sleeping, sprawled out as if nothing had changed. Quietly, I grabbed my phone and walked into the living room. Scrolling through the messages I sent myself last night, I found his name again. Owen. Someone I had met before. Someone familiar. I opened social media, searching his name. The first picture I saw felt like a punch in the gut. Damn it, he was familiar. But not just familiar, he knew me. Owen wasn't just anyone. I scrolled further, realizing the awful truth. He knew me personally. I exited social media, opening Emma's photos on my phone, the ones I had sent myself. One of them was taken at a restaurant. I froze, recognizing the location. This wasn't random, this was intentional. Emma hadn't just cheated on me. She'd done it with someone I could have seen weekly. And everyone knew, but stayed silent. I gripped my phone so tightly my knuckles turned white. This wasn't just betrayal. This was deliberate. I stepped onto the balcony, breathing deeply. I needed a plan. She didn't just betray me. She tried to break me. And everyone around us had stayed quiet. Now it was my turn. I wasn't in a hurry to act. I needed to think everything through, make sure I didn't make any unnecessary moves. Anger is a bad advisor. I started with the basics, studying Owen in detail. I spent hours going through his social media, photos, comments. He lived an active life, traveling, partying, hitting the gym. His friends were just like him, carefree, overconfident. But something caught my attention. In several photos, he was with another woman. Not Emma. The photos were recent, just a week ago. I looked closer. The pictures made it clear, they were a couple. The way they held each other, the smiles, the trips together. I opened her profile. Kate. Her status? Engaged. I exhaled slowly. So, he wasn't just lying to me. I stepped onto the balcony and lit a cigarette. I wasn't a heavy smoker, but in moments like these, I needed something that gave me a sense of control. Owen wasn't just some random guy who got caught up in an affair. He was a manipulator, just like Emma. That made things even easier. I took screenshots of her profile. Now I knew exactly where to start. The first strike had to be precise. I created a new social media account and sent Kate a message. Hey! I know you're engaged to Owen. There's something you need to see. I attached photos of Emma and Owen together. It didn't take long. Kate read the message within 10 minutes. She didn't respond right away, but I could imagine how her entire world was shattering at that moment. 30 minutes later, Emma's phone rang. She was in the kitchen. I heard her pick up. Owen? What happened? I leaned back in my chair, feeling the first real satisfaction in days. The game had just begun. I sat in the living room, calmly scrolling through my phone while, in the other room, the storm began. What? Emma's voice rose, though she was clearly trying to keep her composure. What are you talking about? I could hear Owen's muffled responses, but not the words. Are you sure this isn't some kind of joke? Her tone shifted. Now there was a hint of unease. I smirked. So, Kate reacted instantly? Maybe she threw a fit, maybe she smashed her phone in his face. Either way, Owen was already panicking. Wait, let me think. Emma started pacing in the kitchen. I could hear the soft padding of her bare feet against the floor. She was trying to gather her thoughts. But I wasn't going to give her time. I stood up and slowly walked into the kitchen. Emma fell silent the moment she saw me. Her eyes met mine, and for the first time, I saw something new in them. Doubt. Fear. She suspected me. Exactly what I wanted. I walked over to the coffee maker, completely ignoring her. All right, I'll call you back, she quickly said into the phone and hung up. I poured myself a cup of coffee, feeling her tense stare on my back. Kate found out, she finally said. I took a sip, then looked at her. Who's Kate? Emma studied my face, trying to figure out if I was lying. Owen's fiancée. Interesting. I nodded. She didn't know her fiancé was sleeping with other men's wives? Emma hesitated for a second. She got some photos. Photos? I raised an eyebrow, pretending to be intrigued. Guess someone decided to reveal the truth. She narrowed her eyes at me. You did this, didn't you? I chuckled and set my cup down. You really think I waste my time on your lover? Emma pressed her lips together, as if she wasn't sure if I was lying. Perfect. Even if I did, I added calmly. Does it matter? If you're so proud of your open marriage, why does this bother you? Her jaw tightened. She didn't know how to answer. I sighed and turned back to my coffee. Relax, Emma. Just keep living the way you enjoy. And without waiting for a response, I walked out of the kitchen. I knew her mind was spinning right now. For the first time, she was losing control. And this was only the beginning. For the next few days, I played the role of absolute indifference. I acted as if I didn't care about what was happening with Emma and her lover. But I could see that inside she was burning. She spent hours staring at her phone, her face tense, lips pressed together. She didn't tell me what was going on. She thought that would give me an advantage. But I already had the advantage. Owen wasn't texting her every hour anymore. Their calls became shorter. I caught snippets of their conversations whenever I passed by the room. Kate won't calm down. I don't know who did this. I can't deal with this right now. Every time I heard it, I felt lighter. And then, it all exploded. I was sitting in the living room, reading the news, when the front door slammed open. Emma stormed in, her face twisted with rage. Are you serious? I slowly looked up. What happened? She ripped off her coat and threw it on the floor. Owen got fired. I blinked. That's news. Don't act like you had nothing to do with this. I tilted my head, watching her reaction. And how did that happen? Emma took a deep breath, trying to calm herself. Kate, somehow, she told his bosses that he was having an affair with a married woman. And now they fired him because it's bad for the company's reputation. Interesting, I nodded. So that's Kate's problem, not mine. You set this up. I raised an eyebrow. Me? Emma, I wasn't the one sleeping with an engaged man. She trembled with anger. I know you did this. Proof? She froze. For the first time in a long while, she didn't know what to say. I stood up and stepped closer. Even if I did, I said quietly, weren't you the one who said we were both free? She took a step back, realizing that I was the one in control now. And that thought terrified her. I smiled. Owen was only the first. Now it was her turn. Emma wasn't as confident anymore. She moved around the apartment as if walking through a minefield, throwing nervous glances at me but saying nothing. I didn't push. I let her stew in her own panic. Now that Owen was out of her life, she was alone. A woman who had opened her marriage suddenly found herself trapped in the mess she created. But I knew she wouldn't give up easily. She was waiting for me to explode, to demand answers, to beg her to change. I didn't give her that satisfaction. Instead, I started taking my life back. A few days later, I intentionally stayed out late after work and ignored her messages. She texted, "Are you coming home soon?" I didn't respond. "Max?" Silence again. When I finally came home, she was sitting in the kitchen, her face tense. "Where were you?" I tossed my keys on the counter and shrugged. "Out." "Out?" Her voice was careful, but there was something else in it. "Yeah." She glanced at me, trying to read me. "Was it a woman?" I smirked. "Does it matter?" Her lips pressed together. "Just asking." "I was just asking, too, when you didn't come home at night." She went silent. I slowly walked past her toward the bedroom, leaving her to drown in her own thoughts. The next day, she suddenly decided we needed to talk. "Listen, Max," she started as I was about to leave. "I know you're upset. But you have to understand. I never wanted to hurt you." I stopped. "Oh, so it happened accidentally?" She sighed. I thought you'd be happier if you opened yourself up to something new, too. I laughed. Are you serious? She hesitated. I just want us to live normally. You already had normal. I stepped closer, and she instinctively stepped back. You just thought it wasn't enough. She didn't answer. And you know what? I'm glad this happened. Her eyes widened. Why? I leaned in. Because now you're not in control anymore. She took another step back, realizing that I wasn't the man she could manipulate anymore. Now, she was the one playing the game. And she was losing. Emma was losing control. I saw it in her eyes, in her movements. She was trying to act calm, but nervous habits she'd never had before were appearing one by one. She started biting her nails, even though she always prided herself on her perfect manicure. She began checking her phone more often than usual, despite never being addicted to social media. She was jealous. Yes, jealous. That night, I came home late again. She was waiting in the living room, arms crossed over her chest. Where were you? She asked, trying to sound casual, but her voice was too tense. At a bar, I replied calmly, taking off my jacket. Alone? I shrugged. What, are you worried? She let out a nervous chuckle. No. I told you, we could be honest with each other. I sat on the edge of the couch and looked at her carefully. Were you honest with me when this all started? Emma fell silent. I gave her a few seconds, but she didn't answer. So I continued. Emma, you wanted an open marriage, but somehow you only imagined it one way. That's not true, she whispered. No? I smirked. Then why do you care who I spend my nights with? She swallowed nervously. I just don't want you to do something out of spite. I leaned in closer. What if I told you I don't care anymore? She flinched. For the first time, I saw panic in her eyes. She had expected me to be angry, to cry, to beg her to change. But instead, I was simply letting her go. And she didn't like it. Max? She took a step toward me, reaching out her hand. I stepped back. No. You made your choice. And now you don't like the reality you created. She froze. I looked her straight in the eyes. You have two options. She was breathing heavily, her hands clenched into fists. Either you leave and let me go. Or? I smiled. Or you stay in this lie, but this time, on my terms. Her lips twitched. What do you mean? You'll find out soon enough. I turned and walked to the bedroom. I didn't hear her follow me. But I knew, for the first time, she didn't know what to do. And that meant I was winning. The next morning, Emma wasn't acting like herself. Instead of playing the role of the confident woman in control, she was focused, tense. Her movements were nervous, her gaze kept flickering toward me, as if trying to figure out what I was planning. I gave her nothing. I behaved just as calmly as I had the night before. Got ready for work in silence. Made my coffee. Checked my phone. She couldn't take it anymore. You're really not going to tell me what on your terms means? I looked up and let the silence linger. If I tell you now, it won't be as fun. Her fingers gripped her coffee cup tighter. Max, I don't want a war. But you started one. She pressed her lips together. I stepped closer, set my cup on the table, and looked her in the eyes. Emma, you thought you controlled me. But now you understand you don't. She swallowed hard. What are you going to do? I shrugged. It's simple. Either you live with me on my terms. Or you leave. Her thin fingers tightened around the cup. You're kicking me out? No. It's your choice. Emma stared at me in silence. She hadn't expected this. She thought I'd break under her indifference, that I'd beg or lash out. But the situation had changed. She lost Owen. Her open marriage became a trap. She no longer had power over me. And she hated it. I'll think about it, she finally said, but her voice didn't sound as confident as usual. I smiled. Good. But you know this isn't a game. She said nothing. I picked up my phone and walked out, leaving her alone with her thoughts. I knew she had already made her choice. And now, for the first time in her life, she realized she had lost everything. The next day, when I came home, the apartment was empty. No sounds, no movement. A note lay on the kitchen table. Max, I'm leaving. You win. I stared at those two sentences for a long time. That's it? That's all she could come up with? I slowly set my keys on the table and ran a hand over my face. No tears, no despair. Just silence. I walked through the rooms. Her things were gone. The closet was half empty. Her makeup had disappeared from the bathroom. The only thing she left behind was our wedding photo. I picked it up. In it, we stood together, smiling. Young, in love, naive. I sighed and set it back down. She thought leaving would save her pride. But the truth was, she lost the moment she decided to play this game. She lost me. She lost Owen. She lost control. And now, she had just run away. I sat down in my chair, picked up my phone, and scrolled through our old messages. Once, this chat was full of life. Plans, jokes, long late-night conversations. Now, it was just emptiness. I opened the window, inhaling the fresh air. For the first time in a long time, I felt at peace. I didn't win. I just became free. For the next few days, the apartment felt too quiet. No Anna's voice, no sound of her footsteps in the hallway, no hum of her hairdryer in the morning. But with that silence came a sense of lightness. I no longer woke up thinking I had to win this game. Because now, there was no game anymore. One evening, I sat in a bar, watching the ice in my whiskey slowly melt. So, you really got rid of her? Trevor asked, tossing a peanut into his mouth. I nodded. She just left. And you? He leaned in. Happy? I took a sip, feeling the burn in my throat. I finally feel free. Trevor grinned. Well then, let's drink to your freedom. I raised my glass and, for the first time in a long time, smiled genuinely. Emma thought she could control me. But in the end, she lost everything herself. And me? I didn't win because I made her leave. I won because I realized I didn't need her anymore. This story is over. And I'm starting a new one.